These are picks you should not be making in your fantasy football leagues. In our opinion, the 10 worst picks that we have seen in fantasy football. And before you go to the comments, just give it a minute. Trust me. Let's talk about Jordan Mason here. And again, these are guys that we haven't taken a lot of, and we think they're the worst picks. Doesn't mean they're not going to hit. There's going to be a couple of the guys from these lists probably have good seasons, and it doesn't mean if you took them at your fantasy team is screwed. We have a lot of time to make moves on our fantasy team. But our problem with Jordan Mason is the fact that when you're looking at the compensation actually that the Minnesota Vikings gave up for the 49ers, they pretty much gave up a 6th-round pick. The 49ers just gave up a 6th-round pick to get Brian Robinson, and Brian Robinson, according to all of us, is completely irrelevant. So the team investment is not that much with Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason, keep in mind, is somebody who, in the first 3 years of his career, until like the last 4 games last year when Christian McCaffrey started the season on injured reserve, he didn't really do much. But he did come in last year and started strong, and that's why we're looking at Jordan Mason, and we're considering him as a guy who potentially could be startable this year in fantasy. Because the problem is, and the reason we don't like him as a pick, is he's going pretty much the round after Aaron Jones is. And Aaron Jones is not only the starter, but he's going to get all the receiving usage in Minnesota as well, and potentially the red zone usage. Not to mention, Aaron Jones ripped off a couple of big play runs last year that showed that he still does have that in the tank. And the reason that Jordan Mason was getting 22 and 24 points. Let's look at the 17 and 24 point game. And the thing that all those have in common are that he got 20 or more carries. In fact, he got 28 carries in week 1. He's not getting 28 carries in this offense, in the Minnesota Vikings offense. Not even happening. He also had pretty much no targets and no receptions in any of these games, but he was getting 20 plus carries a game. He was efficient, again, in a pretty good situation there in San Francisco, but he also scored touchdowns in each of these games. And that's the argument I think you can make for Jordan Mason. If you think he's going to score a ton of touchdowns this year and have the David Montgomery role of that Vikings offense, go crazy with it. I understand why that would be why you're drafting. The problem is, again, I just don't think it's worth an 8th-round pick in fantasy football when you're looking at potentially getting Tyron Tracy in the 8th round, somebody that we haven't been high on, but at least he's the starting back in his own offense, right? And there are other guys. If you're drafting running back 2s, I mean, Zach Charbonnet is going to be available around later in the 9th round or at the 8-9 turn. So why not just draft Charbonnet there? I think there are better options, but most importantly, you shouldn't be drafting Jordan Mason there anyways, because you shouldn't be drafting a running back there. You should be taking wide receivers, according to our draft strategy, in the 8th round, like 7th through 9th round, either taking your wide receivers or cleaning up at quarterback or tight end, because you took your running backs and you had 3 running backs through the first 6 rounds. And so if you do your strategy right, you're not even picking Jordan Mason there. But Jordan Mason, as good as he did look in a very limited sample size last year, after those first 4 weeks, he did play 86% of snaps in week 7 against Kansas City, had 8 points. 64% of snaps in week 5 against Arizona, had 8 points. 52% of snaps against Buffalo, had 7 points. Didn't really see a whole lot. And I understand that he was injured for a lot of last season. I understand that he spent a lot of his time not playing and was still banged up. The fact of the matter is, you're drafting him a running back 2, a guy that we don't know is going to get a ton of volume, and we're drafting him right after the starter there. He's not going to get any of the receiving work there. I'd rather just pick somebody else this year in fantasy.
Fading tight end is one of our favorite strategies this year because of the plethora of tight end talent and production upside that you're getting in the later rounds at a fraction of the price of some of the guys that you have to take in the top 6 rounds. And a big reason, some of the names there are Tyler Warren, Evan Ingram. A lot of people really like David Njoku, which I totally understand. Those are really kind of your big 3. Travis Kelce also available there, who was a top 6 tight end last season, going at a fraction of the price that he was last year. I mean, those are just 4 tight ends that we mentioned, and that's technically, in our opinion, fading tight ends. You can fade tight end even further and take. Zach did it in the Flock League. He took Jake Ferguson in like the last round of the Flock League draft, and that's totally fine with us as well. I think one of the picks that I can't stomach, though, is Mark Andrews in the 8th round. When you look at his target volume last season, over the last couple of years, actually, it's really gone down significantly since his big year back in 2021, I think it was at this point. 2021, he was the tight end 1 with like 300 total points, 150 targets. It went down significantly in 2022. He got injured in the middle of the season of 2023. And in 2024, coming off of that injury, playing the entire season still, he had 69 targets total.
Nice.
69 targets. Do the math, guys. On a per-game basis, that's not a lot of targets. That's not a lot of targets at all. And Andrews is a guy that's going right around the same range as Tyler Warren, Evan Ingram, and David Njoku, and Travis Kelce specifically. Let me just show you, before you come back at me and say, oh, there's a reason that we're going to take Mark Andrews in this range. Let me just show you. If you're going to go based off of last year's production or Mark Andrews is going to come back even more healthy this year and be better, let me just show you the target volume of the other guys here. Travis Kelce, 133 targets in 1 less game last season. Evan Ingram, 64 targets in 9 games. So he matched Mark Andrews' production in half the season. So on a per game basis, he doubled that target volume. David Njoku, 97 targets last year. Again, nothing sexy, but in a terrible situation, 97 targets in 11 games, might I add. So 5 less games, he had 50% more target volume in totality over Mark Andrews. If we are projecting out that Mark Andrews is, because again, I have failed to see a analytical, statistical reason for how Mark Andrews is actually going to increase his production. If we are projecting out that Mark Andrews is going to increase his production this season from last year to this year, I want to know how that's going to happen, because I'm looking at Lamar Jackson quite literally putting up the best passing clinic he ever has in his entire career. 4,100 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and still ran for 1,000 yards. 41 touchdown passes last season. Mark Andrews commanded 11 of those touchdowns, and he only had 69 targets still. 474 pass attempts, by far the most passing attempts you've ever seen from Lamar Jackson, a Jackson-led offense in Baltimore ever, in his entire career ever. And we're just now expecting a climb up for Mark Andrews to actually increase his production. I got to know how that's going to happen, statistically. How's that target share gonna even out? Are we projecting out that Zay Flowers is going to lose out on his 120 targets that he commands on a per game basis? Are we projecting out that Rashad Bateman is going to take a step back after he took a step up last season, actually, and looked better than he ever has in his entire career, commanded 72 targets last year? Are we projecting out that DeAndre Hopkins is going to do nothing at all? DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is washed up. I think he's old. I don't really think he's going to be the craziest factor in that offense. But that's another mouth to feed. That's another experienced wide receiver veteran that you add into that offense that I don't think is going to be irrelevant. He'll probably get the same amount of targets that Rashad Bateman did last year. So really, when you're looking at that, you're looking at a touchdown or bust tight end this season for Mark Andrews, because that's what he was last year. I think the biggest argument that you'd have is Isaiah Likely getting injured and missing the start of the season. Isaiah Likely, aside from his 12-target Week 1 performance, had little to no consistent target volume at all throughout the course of the entire season. So again, if you're going to advocate for Mark Andrews this season, I don't think it's really I don't think it's the place to do it in the 8th round or the 9th round, when you can go get those other tight ends that I mentioned, Ingram, Kelsey, and Njoku, and then Warren, who's on the up this season as a young rookie tight end who's really shown a lot of promise and had great draft capital investment. Mark Andrews would be the last of my choices there.
Another guy that I just really don't get. Where's Marvin Mims going this year in drafts? Is it 11th round?
I've seen him go around that range consistently. He usually goes around the other deep threats in that range, who like the Batemans, honestly. I just mentioned Bateman. Bateman usually goes after him.
I think Bateman's a much better pick in that range.
But
Marvin Mims last year, let's just look at what he did last year. I can make the case for Marvin Mims being a pretty terrible pick in fantasy football very quickly. First of all, let's look at his analytics, okay? Last year, this dude was 4th in the league in yards per route run, and it's probably partially because he only ran 176 routes last year, and in terms of target rate, which is how often he was targeted when he ran routes, was 7th in the league. And you might say, well, that's a good thing. Yeah, but the main problem is, and the problem that you can't really overcome, and the reason he wasn't fantasy productive last year, he was 83rd in targets. He only averaged 3 targets per game. If you watched the Broncos, you know it was because they were pretty much using him as a wrinkle in the offense gadget type guy. That's really what they were using him for. And really last year was the opportunity. His only competition last year in terms of fighting for that wide receiver 2 spot was Devon Vele, a rookie who didn't have near as much hype as a prospect as Marvin Mims. And Vele came in and immediately outplayed him in the games that they played together. And Devon Vele is not on the team anymore, but they brought in their true wide receiver 2, who I talked about on our flag plant video, and that is Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram destroys any chance of significant target volume for Marvin Mims this year. It's absolutely not going to happen. And so there is no point in drafting Marvin Mims. Sure, he's going to have games where he has 20 points, and a lot of people will point to the last 2 games of the season last year. He only had 1 game above 5 targets last year, and it was in week 17, and he had 30 points that week on 47% snap share. How many times do you think he played over 50% snap share last year? Again, in an offense where he's going to have the same role this year. He's still the starting wide receiver 2 there. How many times do you think he played above 50% of the snaps last year? None. 0. He wasn't on the field for more than half the game 1 time. And the reason is, again, because he's a gadget guy. And he's not a gadget guy it's not a Deebo Samuel type gadget guy.
He's
Deebo
not
Samuel's
a versatile gadget guy. He's let's send him downfield.
And again, occasionally he's going to have games.
Upfield.
The problem is the last 2 games of the season, he had 2 touchdowns. Each of those games. In his other touchdown games, he had 13 or 19 points. But outside of those 4 games where he scored a touchdown last year, how many double-digit points games did he have? 0. Again, the floor is 0 for this guy. He's not playing enough. He's not getting enough targets. And sure, if he scores a touchdown, hooray, you hit. But do you really want to take a shot on the 1 in 4 chance that at any point in the season Marvin Mims is going to have a touchdown? Because I'm not taking that shot. The volume's not going to be there this year. Let's just go back and top it all off with this. Marvin Mims as a route runner, as a receiver, last year, this is of course according to reception perception. Shout out reception perception and Matt Harmon. They do great work. Man coverage. In terms of his success rate against man coverage when he was on the field, 1st percentile. First. Let's do press coverage. 3rd percentile. 3rd. 22nd percentile against zone coverage, which you would expect, Marvin Mims being a little bit of a smaller guy. But, you know, even Matt Harmon talks about in the write-up, he's like, I've never seen anything like the deployment that he gets. You know, it's
that's not a good thing.
He's a gadget guy in the worst possible way for fantasy football. And so, realistically, he's either going to have to get much better as a receiver, get higher target volume, or he's cooked this year.
Marvin Mims is a worse, less versatile version of Shaheed and Rashad Bateman and Alec Pierce.
He doesn't get anywhere near the utilization that they do, or the type of utilization that those guys get.
Right.
And so Marvin Mims, look, that's a waste. It's a wasted draft spot. By the time you get that late in drafts, draft running backs there. Draft backup running backs that could become starters in an instant. Don't draft receivers like Mims who are going to get you at any point in time 1 point in a certain week.
Yeah. So this next one, kind of a joke. We haven't really had time to talk about it on the channel so far. Quinshon Judkins. I took Quinshon Judkins in the 5th round. Don't take him there. The reason I did it back then is during the Flockley draft is because we had just heard the news that he was not going to be charged, that the charges have been dropped. And then the day after I selected him in the 5th, which was already a reach, and I knew it was a reach, we were told that the NFL was going to have to investigate before he was going to sign his rookie contract. So it was a bad pick. I should have taken Connor or Harvey. I will say with Judkins, like, if you get him in like the 9th round, that would be our breaking point for him. Like, go ahead and take him, because they did waive like every single running back except for Ford and Sampson there. But really, if you're going to take him any higher than like the late 7th, I think it's too risky. Honestly, very similar to the difference between him and Mixon is 1, Mixon is old, and 2, he's actually injured. Judkins is not. But realistically, Quinshon Judkins, the impact that he's going to make on your team is probably going to take at least you're going to get through a quarter of the season before he really is going to be like a significant impact if he doesn't get suspended at all, and that's all up in the air right now. So this one was a pretty quick one because, again, like you guys all know it at this point. If you watch the channel, and this is the first time you've watched the channel, you've probably heard of us from the Flock League and are laughing at me because of my pick, which you absolutely should. So Judkins, don't take him in the 5th.
Brian Robinson is another guy. If you took him before you found out that he was basically dead to the Commanders, kind of sucks. Really does kind of suck. And Brian Robinson, where did he go in the draft you did last night? I need to look at my high stakes league as well.
Also
where's he been going? Because he's still been drafted since
he has been drafted. He went in the 11th round.
He went in the 11th round of mine too. Yeah. What are we doing?
Guys, Brian Robinson
start him.
is undraftable. You are not drafting Brian Robinson. That is
it's so bad.
Do not draft Brian Robinson. I would rather have Shipley. I would rather have Algier. I would rather have Ray Davis. You know why? Because every single one of those guys is the actual running back 2 in their offense. B-Rob is the running back 3, maybe 4. Literally.
What if he is the running back 2? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Have you seen the running back 2 there when Christian McCaffrey is healthy? But the other guys going in the 11th round around B-Rob right now. And by the way, in this draft, my high stakes 250 league, Marvin Mims went in the 10th round. He's been going as high as the 10th round, by the way. But Tyjae Spears, I don't care that he's on IR. I'll easily take him. Tank Bigsby, I'll take him easily. Braylon Allen, give me him. Jaden Blue, absolutely. Ray Davis, 100%. Bashal Tootin, yeah. Jerome Ford, no brainer. Ollie Gordon even. Dylan Sampson. I would take those guys in a heartbeat over Brian Robinson. Look, Brian Robinson's not going to have a role for your fantasy football team. You're going to end up dropping him by week 3. And so why not just pick up a guy like one of those guys I mentioned, like a Bashal Tootin, a Jerome Ford, or Dylan Sampson, like an Ollie Gordon? Why wouldn't you just pick up a guy that could have the potential to be a starter this year and actually, didn't just get traded for a sack of potatoes? That's what I think about Brian Robinson this year. And again, the compensation that they gave up for Brian Robinson was a 6th round pick. They were going to cut him if they couldn't trade him. They're like, I'll see if we can get anything here. And the 49ers were like, you know what? I might push back a little bit and say he's probably going to be the running back 2 there, but it doesn't matter.
I mean, you've seen how they've utilized that backfield when CMC goes down, and it's essentially
that's what I'm saying. Even if he's a running back 2,
technically the running back 2
still stands.
It's a 2-way split between him and Garendo, and maybe they try to implement Jordan James.
And so at that point, like, why are we even drafting him? And I think a lot of people are just still drafting because of the name or because he did go to the 49ers and maybe they're going to use him. And there are some actual people on this actual planet that think it affects Christian McCaffrey. No, it does not. Come on. You think the 49ers, if they have Brian Robinson, are going to take healthy Christian McCaffrey off the field for Brian Robinson? I mean, this is a dude we've said over and over on Dynasty channel, like, he's not that good. He's very meh to own as a prospect. And yeah, sure, as a player. And yeah, sure, he's done well his last couple of years. But I mean, well for him is the running back 21 and the running back 29 in 14 and 15 games with zero receiving upside for the most part. He's not draftable, guys. I mean, at the point where he was traded for almost nothing, I think we should have taken the hint and just probably avoided Brian Robinson altogether. And so I'm going to be done with this one, just saying don't take Brian Robinson this year. Nathan and I are split on this next one, so
this is probably the only thing that we've been split on the entire offseason.
It's one of the bigger ones. We have disagreed on this guy a lot, so I'm just saying I disagree with this one, but Nate is out on this guy for sure.
So Stephon Diggs is a guy that I think consistently all season he's not been a riser, he has not been a faller. He's gone 7th round across the board, everywhere, all the time. That's where he goes. Like that's not in question. This is not necessarily like a price thing where it's like, oh, you can take him past this point. You can't take him if he goes this high. Like, you know exactly where he's going to go. And situationally, like, you have to admit, I mean, when you look at that depth chart, they actually kept almost everyone except for Kendrick Bourne, who they just waived. But the depth chart there at wide receiver is Diggs, Boutte, Baker, Demario Douglas, and Chisholm, and then Kyle Williams and Matt Collins. It's disgusting. I mean, when you look there, you're like, okay, Stephon Diggs, in theory, would be the wide receiver one there. When I look at the other wide receivers in that range, every single one of them I would take a bet on over a 31-year-old wide receiver who's coming off of an ACL tear and an offense that, historically speaking, we know what that offense really is going to look like, and that's going to be a very run-heavy offense. And I don't want to fade Drake May here at all. I don't want to say that he's going to be bad. I think Drake May has a good chance to be solid this year. A lot of it because of his rushing upside. It has been years and years and years since we've seen it's been since Edelman that we've seen a highly productive wide receiver that's consistent in that offense. And to put all of that on Stephon Diggs, like maybe they're better as a passing offense. I would expect them to be this season with Mike Vrabel. But Stephon Diggs is not an A.J. Brown in Tennessee. He's not at 31 years old off of an ACL. Stephon Diggs is, you saw how he was utilized last season in Houston, and this is kind of what happens. We've seen this multiple times. We've seen this with Cooper Kupp as well in kind of the latter part of his career. These older wide receivers that are less impactful as like true alpha number ones, the first sign of regression that you see for those wide receivers is they become exclusive slots. They become guys that run mainly out of the slot. And again, schematically, it made sense for Houston to run Diggs that way alongside Nico Collins last season and Tank Dell, and he was very good. Again, before the ACL tear, he was very, very solid. It's really, really hard for me to take a bet on that when Jordan Addison, who will be out for 3 games, is in a much better situation. Jordan Addison is the number 2. Jerry Jeudy, Jerry Judy's in a terrible offense. It's as questionable. It's not as questionable. It's even more questionable than the Patriots situation. Jerry Jeudy coming off of a wide receiver 1 season last year and 145 targets where Joe Flacco is throwing the ball. Joe Flacco helped Josh Downs put up 14 points per game when he was healthy. Matthew Golden, Avery took the shot on Matthew Golden over Stephon Diggs in the Flock League. So I know you prefer Matthew Golden over Stephon Diggs, and I do too. I'm with you there.
It depends on if I draft. Like if I would have gotten Igbuka, I would have paired Igbuka and Diggs together probably. So they're all in the same tier for me. It's just a matter of where I think Stephon Diggs is probably a higher floor player. I think any of the rookies around there are high ceiling players for sure.
Yeah, and when you're going for 7th round picks, at the point that you get to the 7th round, your high floor guys are like what is their floor and what is their ceiling if they're going in the 7th round? Like at that point, that's when you want to start taking your ceiling picks because these guys are going in the 7th round and beyond for a reason. And it's because there are so many questions. I genuinely question what Stephon Diggs' ceiling is. All these other guys, I don't question their ceiling. Pearsall with no Ayuk and probably no Jennings to start the season, I don't question what his ceiling really is. Jeudy, I don't question what his ceiling is. I just saw it last year. Golden, he's the one there, and everyone else in that offense is injured. Like legit everyone. Romeo Doubs is the only other guy that's healthy there. And then it's like Heath. I think it's Malik Heath is the next healthy guy there. Wicks and Reed and Watson I think are all going to miss at least week 1 to start the season. And then Chris Godwin, obviously missing time. That's why he's going in the 7th round, so I won't talk about him. Down's going to be a little banged up to start the season too, but you've seen his ceiling as well. So again, that's going to be my big reason is I like all the other wide receivers priced in his range. I like the upside and the promise that they could have. And I honestly I don't trust Stephon Diggs. I don't trust him at all. And I will not be betting on him this season. And if it destroys me, if it ends up biting me in the butt because I didn't take him, so be it. He's a 31-year-old wide receiver coming off an ACL tear.
All right, let's talk about Jaylen Warren, who has had, by the way, every opportunity known to man to be the lead back in that offense. Because Najee Harris, I mean, let's just dive into Najee. Just to kind of make my point here. Najee Harris the last couple of years. Last year, Najee's team was 4th in team run plays per game. They were running the ball at an extremely high rate, and he was 7th in carries. But when you're looking at his efficiency, 39th in yards per touch, 47th in true yards per carry, 31 in yards created per touch, Najee was straight up bad. There was nothing he was doing. And he was also, 22nd in the league in targets, 11th in red zone touches. He pretty much had zero redeeming qualities other than the fact that he was a very middle of the road running back who was eclipsing 1,000 yards every year for the past 3 or 4 years. Okay. That's the situation. I'm setting the stage for this. Jaylen Warren has played with Najee Harris, but he's played behind Najee Harris. This is a guy that if they wanted to give Jaylen Warren a workhorse bell cow workload, why would they have not already done it? And if they wanted to do it this year, why did they draft a running back in the 3rd round of the NFL draft? Why? Answer those 2 questions for me, because it doesn't really make any sense. Jaylen Warren's going to be 27 years old, and in his 3 seasons in the NFL, he's averaged 5, 11, and 8 points per game. And you might look at his 2023 season and be like, okay, this is what I think Jaylen Warren could do this year. And while I understand that he did have a good year that year, a lot of it was, there was a couple things really. He was one of the most efficient backs in the league that year. In terms of opportunity, he wasn't crazy, right? But you're looking at his receptions that year. 61 receptions, that's 3.6 per game. He was 5th in receptions in 2023 when he averaged 11 points per game. The problem with this is I think Caleb Johnson is going to get a fair amount of work in the receiving game. And so I think this is going to severely limit Jaylen Warren's upside. And Jaylen Warren might be somebody that you draft. This is why I think he could be an exception to this. He might be somebody you draft at the beginning of the season and then flip. Then that makes him a decent draft pick. If you draft Jaylen Warren intentionally and know what you're doing with him, great. But if you're drafting Jaylen Warren to flex him in weeks 14, 15, and 16, it's a bad idea, trust me. Shouldn't do it. Because by then, I fully expect Caleb Johnson to be getting the receiving workload here and the red zone workload. And I don't think Jaylen Warren, again, why would they have not given Jaylen Warren that opportunity already? They know what they have in Jaylen Warren. They've seen it. They know exactly the guy they have. They know exactly how he fits. And my guess is they're going to use Jaylen Warren exactly how they've used him in each of his first 3 years, behind a better running back. And so, again, if you're drafting him intentionally to maybe start him at the beginning of the season and move him, I think that's a really good idea. It makes him a decent draft pick. If you're drafting him to start on your team at the end of the year, I don't think I would do it because I ultimately don't think he's going to be a very good flex option for any type of playoff team. You've got to shoot. Again, you've got to go for guys with upside. That's why it's golden in my flex spot. You've got to go for guys with upside if you really want to win. Jaylen Warren is not a guy you flex in the playoffs and you win your championship. Straight up, I will die on the hill. He is not.
Nick Chubb is not a very good pick right now because of the Joe Mixon news. Obviously, he's going to be a riser since Mixon will be out for at least the first 4 weeks of the season, maybe longer, depending on if he actually decides to have surgery on that injured foot. But with Nick Chubb, you don't have to look any further than last season to see that he has more than lost a step. He's lost his juice. He's lost literally everything since he unfortunately annihilated his leg in 2023. He had 100 carries last season. It's not like he was exempt from opportunity. 100 carries, 3.25 yards per carry, only 3 touchdowns. It was really, really ugly. If you watch Nick Chubb last season, if you literally just if you went out of your way, if you took away the name, if you didn't look at his name and you just watched Nick Chubb last season, if you watched unnamed running back last season and what he did, you'd be like, that guy doesn't belong in the NFL. Like, I'm sorry, it's true. Nick Chubb is going to get a significant amount of opportunity to start the season with the Houston Texans. It's not going to be pretty, and it's going to turn into a 3-back committee very, very quickly. When you look at the depth chart there, interestingly enough, Woody Marks is actually 4th in the depth chart officially. Dameon Pierce is the RB2, which you've seen what Dameon Pierce has done in the past. And then Dare Ogunbowale is the running back 3. Please don't correct me for how to pronounce that name. I would love to see you pronounce it correctly.
Ogunbowale.
Yeah, my bad. And look, with Nick Chubb, guys, there is a reason that Mason is flexing the frick out of his lackluster depth at running back. and just, trying to sell Nick Chubb to me every other day and won't leave me alone about it, and it's driving me insane. I will go down swinging with my 2 terrible early round rookie picks in Caleb Johnson and Quinshaw Judkins before I ever take a shot on Nick Chubb this season. I will go as far down as a Denny's in Austin, Texas before I take a shot on Nick Chubb.
So there you go. Again, we're not telling you not to draft these guys or that you can't draft these guys, but basically we're just telling you these are guys we haven't been drafting, and here's why. Ultimately, these are the picks we dislike the most, and so take it with a grain of salt, but we did want to bring these to your attention. So make sure, if you enjoyed the content, please do us a huge favor and drop a like, and make sure you subscribe. We're going to have in-season fantasy content for you starting next week, the entire year. You are, trust me, not going to want to miss our in-season content, so make sure you're subscribed. Also, you can check out our season pass. It's $30, the best site in fantasy football, the best tools in fantasy football for the best price in fantasy football. Has 4 different creators that are all fantastic, and you get everything you need to win your fantasy football leagues. Again, it ends up being like $3 a month, so make sure season pass with code domain. You can use code domain and unlock all of our exclusives, including some special stuff coming up in season. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.